What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Meacham with the Alexander City Chamber and the Lake Martin Young Professionals. Today we have an episode of Access to the Issues, which is a series of events that we've done over the course of the last few years on important topics in our community. And we try to always gear those towards engaging young people. And today we have a very special episode. It's with Scott Hardy, who is an Alexander City Councilman in District 3, and Tal East, the Tallapoosa County Probate Judge. Both these guys are young folks in elected office, serving public, and I think that you'll see throughout the interview that they're doing it for the right reasons, which is something that we really wanted to get to the heart of and talk about their motivations, their desires, and kind of their inspirations for doing these difficult jobs. We would like to thank our sponsors. The presenting sponsor of Access to the Issues is Tallapoosa County Commissioner T.C. Coley, and the year-long sponsors for the YP program are Valley Bank as the presenting sponsor and Lee Marketing Group as the gold sponsor. So without them, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do like this and all the other events throughout the year. Hope you guys enjoy it. When you see Scott and Tal, tell them thank you for their service and good luck. Hey guys, y'all ready to get going?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate y'all joining me today. You know, we're here to talk about just essentially young people like yourselves being involved in local affairs. You're both elected officials. Scott, you're on the City Council for Alexander City representing District 3. Tal, you're probate judge for Tallapoosa County. Both different roles, but I think it's important that young people get involved, and I think it's great that we have young people like y'all here in our community who are kind of leading the way in that regard. Nationally and around the state, there's a lot more interest in young people getting involved in politics. So wanted to hear your stories, talk about what drives you to be involved, why young people might want to consider following your paths, and overall just kind of have a general conversation and discussion about what you like about it and why you do it. So we'll just get going. Scott, you first. Just introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you like to do, general stuff.
I got you. Well, my name is Scott Hardy, and I am born and raised here in Alexander City. I am married to KK Hines, formerly KK Hines, now KK Hardy. We have going on a 5-month-old golden doodle, so we're newly married, and that was our first project really together, so that's been a lot of fun. But I'm currently the executive director for the Building Trades Alliance, which is an organization that is primarily responsible for educating and advocating for younger people to get involved in skilled trades. I'm a big fan of the golf course when I get an opportunity to, and I love to participate with anything related to Lake Martin.
Awesome. Mr. East, Judge East, a little bit about yourself, your background.
Sure. Well, obviously right now I'm probate judge Tallapoosa County. It's opposed to my good friend Scott, who is a councilman. He has a full-time job. My job is a full-time job inside of the political arena. I'm from Daviston, Alabama. I would be remiss if I did not mention my mother and father, Tim and Ginger East, that anything positive about me, they help produce. I presently reside in Newside, Alabama, in my grandparents' old home I purchased from my mother. I'm graduate of Troy University, and I'm a lifelong Tallapoosa County resident, though I have worked out of state many times, and I love serving my community, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So some differences between what your involvement is in the political realm. Tal, you mentioned that yours is a full-time capacity as probate judge, and Scott, yours is as a city council member is technically part-time with a couple of meetings per month, but I know you take it way more seriously than just a part-time job. So I guess, you know, going into the next topic, what are the primary responsibilities of your role? And, you know, if you kind of had to paint a picture of what your day's like, tell me. As
probate judge,
yeah.
Me? Okay. So I'll start with primary responsibilities. So, and I'll try not to leave anything out because they are myriad. I'm the chief elections officer for the county. I work alongside the circuit clerk and the sheriff. We basically share those roles. It's kind of like the Vatican Council would be, or would have been the bishops, but and the Pope being the bishop in Rome, he's the first among equals. So I share everything with the sheriff and the circuit clerk, but ultimately it's my role. So that's one of the things we do. We also collect ad valorem taxes, which you commonly know as car tags. We do car tags, boat tags, fishing licenses, driver's license renewals. We are over the probating of wills and estates. So if someone, short version for people who may not understand what that is, if you pass away and you would like to leave your loved one something, if you just put it in a will, that doesn't mean they get it. It has to go through a legal process to make sure that's transferred. We are over mental commitments. So if we have someone who is an immediate danger to themselves or others through no fault of their own, the prison's not the best place for them, then we try to find placement for them. We also are basically the county's record keeper. So we record documents in the basement. Some of those are voluntary, like some wills are recorded for posterity's sake. Some powers of attorney. But say, for instance, we just had a city election here in Alexander City. That here we sit, it is August 27th, so this past Tuesday we had a city election. When they certify those results on Tuesday, they've already brought those results to me. They will bring the final results to me when provisionals are counted, and we'll record them in the basement. So from now evermore, if anybody wants to know who got the votes in the 2020 Alexander City municipal election, or the Jackson's Gap municipal election, or the Dable municipal election, they'll all be under recording with us. And so we're kind of the county's record keeper. So that's kind of the short version of all the different things we do as an office. What I do personally is supervise that, particularly with elections things, but I do have a great staff. I don't want to take any credit. But there are some things, particularly the judicial aspects, that I have to handle personally. So as we were speaking earlier, mental commitments and things of that nature, probating of wills and estates, all those require my signature. There are many other things that require my signature, but those in particular are directly fall under my auspices, and I can't really get any of my staff to do for me, so I have to do them all myself. So most of my day is handled either supervising my staff and trying to make sure things get done or things function well, into the individual responsibilities that I can't really have anybody help me with.
Understand. How many people are on your staff?
I have 14 staff members, 13 full-time staff members, and 1 part-time.
Okay. Something you said kind of sparked my interest a little bit in the process of recording the votes in the basement. It sounds kind of neat, in the basement, recording the votes. Do you get to see who voted for who?
No. So I don't know if many people are aware of this. Now in Alabama, this was not the case for a long time. You can see what political primary you voted in. For many, many years, that was not the case. But you can see who voted. But you can't see who they voted for.
Just the fact that they voted.
And you won't be able to see who that they voted until those provisionals are counted and we get a final tally, a certified result. And then probably that Wednesday when the Board of Registrars finishes inputting the data, you'll be able to see who voted, who didn't vote. That's one of the things. So let's just say if you were probably looking at a runoff in Alexander City, we are looking at a runoff in Dable and Camp Hill. So you can find out who voted. You can't figure out if they voted for you. But let's just say you figure out that your next door neighbor didn't vote. You might want to make sure he goes votes the next time. Mm-hmm. So those types of information are available. Which primary you voted in has only recently become available. There's a change in law that allowed that to happen. Just as a personal note, I would argue that's probably for political professionals, which at one time I was one, that's probably helps our job a little bit. But from a public policy standpoint, if I don't know which party primary you voted in, then I don't know whether I'm a Republican, but I wouldn't know in a primary, and this being a predominantly Republican area, which primary you normally vote in. And so I would have to be more aggressive about seeking your vote. But because I know that if I can go look up Jacob Meacham and see he voted in every Democratic primary, well, then I don't need to talk to you about whether you're going to vote for me, because you're not going to vote for me. You're not even going to have the opportunity to vote for me. Mm-hmm. So that's a change in law that was made to allow for non-crossover voting, which I don't think in and of in the principle of is a bad idea, in runoffs. But the only way to prevent that is to document which primary you voted in to start with. I think an outlier of that, an unintended consequence is that now I can dissect my primary election in a Republican primary, and the Democratic primary doesn't matter here as far as a countywide election is concerned, and then say, take this segment of people and I don't mean black, white, whatever, but people who vote in the Democratic primary. And I try to address problems for those people. I try to do whatever I can for anybody, but I can write those people off. I don't need those people because they're not going to vote for me. So in an election, and so if we went back, and it's common for many states to register by party, so that's common. We were an outlier in that we didn't know what party people voted in. I think it led to more people working together regardless of party. I think that would be a positive step, but that's just, I'm on the soapbox, so I apologize.
No, that makes sense. I can understand why, from a tactical campaigning standpoint, it would be advantageous to know, but
from a public policy standpoint, I think it leads to negative outcomes.
Sure. That's interesting. And for the record, I have not voted in every Democratic primary.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, he has. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Scott, your job is a little bit different because of its nature of being part-time. So tell us a little bit about what that entails and your scope of work.
Well, as you mentioned, it is a part-time job, but it's definitely one that if you are trying to be successful or have effective outcomes, it can't just be going to the meetings twice a month. So a lot of background things have to take place to ensure that you're as successful as possible. But in terms of a city council member, Alex City is representative of a mayor-council form of government. So we have a mayor and 6 council members based on the population that we have. In a larger area, we may have 10, 12 city council members or based on what the population is. Because we are more than 10,000 population-wise, the mayor does not have a vote. So strictly everything that happens is based off of results from the council. We're responsible for legislating the spending, whether that's infrastructure, any initiatives that are taking place. We're responsible for the spending of the money. We're also responsible for appointing positions to the city. So we have 6 things that we have to appoint, or 6 positions rather, and that is police chief, fire chief, finance director, city clerk, city judge, and city attorney. All of those are responsible under the council. And we also, Alex City, we appoint Board of Education members and several other different boards within the community, but that's our primary goals or responsibilities. And a day-to-day for me, it varies on what's happening. Lately, it's been the inefficiencies in our trash pickup. That's been something that's been very hot and heavy within the community. We're definitely working on that to try to come up with something to ease that up a little bit. But overall, your complaints within your district, bring those to your city councilman, and then that person will bring it to the appropriate parties to make sure that action is done.
So that's your process for whether it's a trash pickup, timely manner or issue, or a pothole, which we always hear is the your phone ringing off the hook. Not saying you, but that's the stereotype of a council member. Your phone's going to be ringing off the hook for potholes. What are if you had to say, with the bulk of your issues arising from your citizens, what is it?
I would say infrastructure is probably the biggest, I won't say complaint, but issue that is brought to myself and other council members, specifically roads. So everybody wants to make sure that the road is in the top condition that it can be in. And unfortunately, we're not in a position right now where we can make sure that every road at the exact time, at this exact moment, is paved and is nicely groomed as we would like it to be. But we do have a system in place that allows us to, based on the grade of the road, for us to be able to maximize the funding that we have, which comes from a half-cent sales tax, ACRIP, which allows us, we have $1.2 million a year that is allocated directly for road improvement projects. So that would be the primary one.
I would imagine so. I mean, I just hear it all the time about people.
I mean, and it's part of it. And so I really didn't know what to expect as I was entering the office. That, that is a joke that you'll get a lot of calls about that, your lights being out. But
do you get a lot of calls?
Not as much in the very beginning, but it was more so citywide at that point because there was so much new and people didn't know whose city council person represented who. But now, for the most part, I do get some out of district calls, but I try to work with other city council members to make that happen. And
so you're getting ready to go into your second term. As Tal mentioned, your election was a couple of days ago from the date that we currently sit at. And you ran the first time in 2016 without any competition. And this time did a good enough job in the last 4 years that no one opposed you going forward. So it must feel good to have that kind of confidence from your district.
Yeah, and I'm very appreciative of the constituents of District 3. The first election in 2016, I think the city was looking for so much change that I was in a position where I thought that I had an opportunity to win, and we may discuss this a little bit later, but my reasoning for running was Bob Howard, who is the previous city council member prior to me being elected, had chosen not to run. And I was just weighing some different things and thought that this may be an opportunity for me to get involved and get my feet wet in the political arena. And nobody ran against me then. And fast forward 4 years, and obviously now we're sitting here unopposed again and getting ready for my second term as District 3 City Councilman.
Congratulations, and that's something that takes place every 4 years. Tal, you were elected in 2018.
December will be 2 years.
Okay.
2 years ago. I took off. I was sworn in December because there was a vacancy.
Every 4 years. That's every 6.
So 2024 will be my reelect.
Okay. Scott, City Council, Tal, Probate Judge. Why? And Tal, we'll go with you first. Why Probate Judge? What did you see in that job that said this is what I want to do? Because this is your first elected office.
Sure. I've never run for office before. I had worked in the private sector previously, though I had one small stint in a public sector job for 6 months. I worked in the private sector, but I worked all over the country. I really feel like that being from this local community, though if anybody wanted to seek office, they need not be if they've made this their home. But if you care about your local community, then you have to get involved. And the reality is that somebody wants the job. Somebody wants it. They'll be good, they'll be bad or whatever, but if good people don't step forward and try to do an appropriate job, then somebody bad will. These jobs are not going to go unfilled. So, I made a conscious decision that I would accept, at least for the short term, I haven't determined my long-term future, accept less financial gain. I can have some outside ventures. I do have, a small farm. I have some other outside ventures where I'm allowed to make some additional income, though I have ethics rules that can constrain me in some ways. But I made a conscious choice to accept less long-term money to be able to live in Tallapoosa County, which is where I grew up and where I love and where my family is, and try to serve my community. Whether I will always want to do that or not, I don't know. I certainly wouldn't leave it if I didn't feel like there was somebody behind me that could do it. Not that I'm the savior of anything or I'm fantastic at anything, but I certainly do care. And I care a great deal, not only about the function of the office, but how I'm perceived in that office. I have a mama that I usually eat supper with on Fridays and eat Sunday dinner after church with. And I got to look at her in the face 2 times a week at least if I don't go see her. And what the perception of me or my office matters a great deal to me. And so I made a decision to do that. Why a probate judge is a little bit different question. I feel like that there are rooms for improvement there, right? So if you decide to become a legislator or a city councilman, you're using the power of those offices to affect change in your local community or in your state. I feel like a lot of the changes we can make are from a service standpoint. So if you come to me and say, I want my road paved, there's not a whole lot I can do for you unless you got some paving stuff and I'll help you pave it just because you asked. But I don't have any control in that regard. We're more of a service-oriented office. And so I feel like we could provide better service to the people that we represent. Not that the people previously didn't, but I do feel like there's some technological changes, some things that could be made that we have already made that will make things more efficient. As far as, it's government, right? There are certain inefficiencies built into the system, and they're going to exist, and they're going to frustrate you, and they're going to frustrate me. But there are certain changes we can make in that office that I feel like really affect the way people perceive government on a granular level. And so we're still attempting to do that. We have new software system in our recording department. We have a new software system in our tag department. Costs a little money up front. It's going to save us money in the long run. Same thing with some other things we're doing in the recording department. We're moving towards updating certain things that cost a little money now, but save us money in the long run and make us much, much more efficient. And so I look at the office, I look at a way that I could be service oriented in my community, but also provide a service better. So I looked at the office and thought that is where I could make a difference. And I'm happy with the choice I made.
Scott, your motivation, your desire for seeking the office that you're in, city council, what was it?
Initially, it was just I was a young man who wanted to make a change and impact in my community, and based on what the circumstances were, there was an opportunity to do that. I probably wouldn't have run, honestly, if Bob Howard, the previous council member, as I said, had chosen to stay in. I probably wouldn't have run. So the stars had aligned for that. I always have felt I was going to get involved at some point in Alexander City politics, but at the time I wasn't sure that's what I wanted to do then, but took a leap of faith and things worked out. But since then, what I've learned is that I think the biggest way to create or initiate the change that you're looking for really is hyper-local. It starts on the local level. And so city council members have the ability to appoint the police chief, who then is responsible for hiring officers, who then are responsible for protecting and serving. You're also putting people in positions where they have direct conversations and interactions within the community that can bolster success later. So I think that from a city councilman's perspective, while I did talk about the money aspect and the things that people will appoint, it's just having that connection between the local community. And so if you want something done, there isn't really anything that the president can do about your road not being paved, or your power going out during a storm, or your trash not being picked up, or a dog being stray. So I think that while those are minute things as a whole, I think that you have the ability to create change in a more effective way and impactful way on a local level.
That's a good point. And as we've talked about before, it might seem like an issue that's not that important on a larger scale, but it's the most important issue to that person. And if you can solve it, then they're gonna be in your corner.
And that's probably been some of because I work out of town, I haven't had the opportunity as much. A lot of the things I would do would occur after 5 or on the weekends. And so I've been at home since March, so I've had a really good opportunity to do some things throughout the day and visit with people, and it's been a lot of fun. I've established a new lunch routine where one of my constituents has become one of my favorite people because of her ability to provide such home-cooked meals. But she's just an example of the type of community that we have. But as a whole, again, I just think that what you were saying about, I wasn't necessarily saying those issues are minute, but I'm saying if on the grand scale, it's probably not the same thing as trying to correct the problem of a pandemic. But
right.
For that individual person, as you said, it's the most important thing. So then as a city council person, it becomes a top priority for me.
Sure. And like, for that person, and for the city, viewing that issue, when I say the city, I'm talking about the overall operation. It's not as important as, the top item in a $55 million budget and all the priorities that they have to do. But for that person, it's the thing that they see the city doing for them. And so that's why it's important. And that's, it's a great example of, why people, view their city council members as, such critical elements of getting things done. And it's that true representative, democracy sort of thing that, everything our country's all about. So
yeah, and
on a smaller scale.
The thing I really have grown to appreciate the most about it is, in some higher political offices, you have the ability to, I'm not going to say hide, but you don't have to be as visible at times within your community. Especially if you're on the federal level, you're in and out of the state. And if you're on the state level, you have several different counties to interact with. So it's a little bit different. But as a city council member, there is no hiding. So you can't expect people to not be concerned or interact with you. If they liked something you did, they're going to let you know, and if they didn't, they're going to let you know as well. So it's nothing to see somebody in the grocery store, at the ball field, or anything like that. So I think that part, I've grown to appreciate that a little bit more, is because I understand now how important this role actually is because we're truly the only politicians that can make direct change for individual citizens on a consistent basis.
They're the ones you see you're the one they see as the having the ability to influence those things, more accountability.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
It makes sense.
And Scott makes a really good point. I represent roughly 42,000 people. That's quite a lot. I mean, our county it's a moderate-sized county for Alabama, but there are many people, probably people in East Tallahassee or people, wherever that don't know that I live at 1500 Pine Road, New Site. If you're a city council person, not only do they know your phone number, they know where you live. So if they can't get you on the phone, they'll just come see you. So, when he talked earlier about it being a part-time job, if you don't answer the phone, they'll just come visit.
Yeah.
They'll come see you. So there is no hiding. And I commend people who take that owner's responsibility. At least I do have a full-time job that extends well beyond the hours of 8 to 5, but I get compensated full-time pay for it at least. He does not, and it is really a service-oriented thing, and you can't hide, and it is a full-time job, or maybe not full-time job, but it's full-time responsibility. Yeah. And so that's 100% true, and I just commend people who've chosen to serve their communities in that way. Scott and any others, whether you disagree or agree on policy, there were 6 city council elections in Alex City this past time. 2 were unopposed, 4 were opposed. So, but that's still a small number of people who are seeking to serve their community, and it's a necessary job, and you won't get people to do it. But regardless of how good or bad they are, the fact that you're willing to step forward with basically nothing to gain other than helping out your community or getting fussed at if you don't do what people want is a positive note, and it should be commended. It is an honorable thing. Oftentimes politics and politicians, deservedly so, are denigrated, but it's an honorable thing to put yourself forward, particularly at the local level, because the reward is basically personal, and that's about it.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that when we get certain things accomplished, and not necessarily from a city level, but if I have a constituent that calls me and says, hey, having a drainage issue, and we get that corrected, and then to get the phone call to say, the city was so great in their assistance, I appreciate your help. Those are the little wins that make some of the losses that we have to deal with worthwhile.
Sure. And the man in the arena, who was the one that made that quote, Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, so that's a famous kind of an analogy about people getting into the public sphere and putting themselves out there for that criticism or the credit in some cases too, which I think is a good segue into the next question for y'all. The next topic is, what sparked your interest in politics? Is it something you've always wanted to do? Was there involvement at an earlier age, like school government, SGA? I ran for vice president of my 6th grade class on the slogan, "Wake up and vote for Jacob." I didn't win. It was terrible. I tried to run in 11th grade, but didn't have the GPA requirements, so that was the thing that kept me from SGA involvement. But people get involved for all different sort of reasons. Was there someone or something that involved you or inspired you along the way? Was there a political hero? We'll kind of dissect those as we go along. But Tal, what sparked your interest in politics?
As a side note, it's okay. Ronald Reagan went to Eureka College. That's a fact. So, not everybody who's a great political figure had a 4.0. My father, the person who got me that's different. Hero question is my father. What sparked my political interest for the most part, I've always been somewhat interested, is my mother was an elected official. She was the superintendent of education for our Tallapoosa County schools. I was heavily involved in that when I was in high school. That just really got me interested. Like I said, this is my first elected office. I've never run for office before, but I've been involved in public policy and other things ever since then, and that's what sparked my interest. My political hero is my father. My father was the mayor of Daviston, Alabama. For those who don't know, Davidson, Alabama is a population of about 300 to 400 people in North Tallapoosa County. Once Goveville unincorporates, which is in the process of happening, it will be the smallest incorporated community, therefore having a mayor and council in Tallapoosa County. When my father was mayor of Davidson, he got $50 a month, which was up from the $35 a month his predecessor, Larry Smith, got. So much as I was alluding to earlier, or specifically saying with Scott, in order to be mayor of Davidson, you have to want to be mayor of Davidson and really serve people. And so the inspiration for me to become what I am is probably, or the spark would be my mother, but my hero is my father. Because my father gained nothing really from it, and literally nothing, because he gave the $50 away every month. He donated it to charity every month. So it is an act of selfless service. If anybody who gets into public service, be it a political service or other service, with that mindset, will make mistakes. None of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things, that upset people sometimes. We're not going to always do the right thing or say the right thing because we're human beings. But people who enter public service with the mindset of selfless service will be on the right path. And my father, who also was not perfect, who also upset people as mayor of Davidson, entered public service for that reason. And so that's my hero.
That's a great one. If you can combine that inspiration for your career, with what everybody always kind of looks up to their father as just a hero in general, that's a great combination. How about you, Scott?
Well, I've always had an affinity for politics. I find it interesting to basically, you're putting yourself out there for somebody to make a decision to put you in the office. So it's truly at the core, at times it can be a popularity contest. We'll put it that way. So when I was younger, I associated that with people liking you. Now, as I've gotten older, clearly that does not equate there, because there are a lot of people who are in office that I'm sure people don't necessarily like them as individuals. So you can't always use that. But I think I ran for treasurer maybe in the 5th grade and got crushed.
Did you have a bad slogan like I did?
I don't even think I had a slogan. I think I just came up with something the day of. We had to do some speech over the microphone. I think there was maybe like WILD TV.
Oh, yeah.
That was it. So I lost that. I didn't participate in the SGA. I helped a friend of mine run for president, Caroline Britton. So that was...
Was that your first successful campaign?
That was my first successful campaign. Currently my only successful campaign, I guess.
That's right.
On that end. But I think from how I really thought I wanted to get into it, my first job was in the nonprofit world, which was the ASF Foundation, and they put on the sport, the games is what they're called now, but it's similar to the Olympics for the state games. And we dealt heavily with the legislature because we needed funding. And so for different initiatives we had. So I got to really get involved on that end and saw how important it was. 2 things. If you're going to be in politics, you have to be able to speak to people and you have to be able to raise money. Those 2 things are imperative. And you can work on policy going down the line, but have to be able to be approachable and somebody that's relatable in raising money. And I was responsible for the raising of funds, and I saw how effective that could be from a political standpoint. But from a spark, I was always around politicians, and whether or not I knew it or not, I was always around them. But when I was elected, I was 28 years old. So I was the youngest and the first African American to represent my district. So going in, in this area, there aren't a lot of people that I could go to ask questions outside of the 2 people that have been influential, one specifically, Garland Gamble, and then obviously TC Coley. TC has been a tremendous mentor of mine and helped me navigate through this process, especially when you don't necessarily have anybody that you can look to who has done it and had to experience some of the things that you may have to. We brought up Teddy Roosevelt. I think his speeches are phenomenal. Lyndon Johnson, JFK. Obviously, as a minority, having somebody like Barack Obama be elected president, that gives you at least a visual that it can be done. So it gives you something to strive for. But my wife and my mother and mother-in-law calls this person a man crush of mine. But Walt Maddox is probably my my political hero. I've learned a lot from him in terms of just sticking up for what you believe in, and despite what people may say, whether that offends anybody or not, you have to stand up for what you believe in. But seeing how he was able to be such a great leader.
Mayor of Tuscaloosa,
yes, Walt Maddox. And I was able to help him on his gubernatorial campaign. I was a social media director for him, and so I spent pretty much 8 months with him every day, and so we had a lot of good conversations. So that would probably be my political hero.
How do you reconcile, I guess both of you maybe for this question, and this is not something I sent you guys ahead of time, but I think it's a good thing to talk about, the difference between the right thing, because can the right thing vary depending on your politics? And is the right thing always the right thing, or is the right thing different for one party versus the other?
Well, I would say this. There certainly is a thing as absolute truth. Okay? There is an absolute right. But we're faulty vessels. We can't always interpret what the right and wrong thing is. We have to do the best we can. There is a thing as absolute truth. There is an absolute right or wrong, or I believe, but who among us can claim a monopoly on how to determine what that is or what that is? Have a good base, I think, in terms of raising, in terms of principles that you live by. Try to do that. Try to do the right thing, but understand that you're not always going to do the right thing, or even with the right intentions, because we're human beings. We're fallible vessels, and so that is, you just do the best you can with that. Sometimes you will suffer politically for that, and that's okay. If people are open-minded about where your principles are and where you stand and how you approach your daily life, or how do you approach your job, or how do you approach things, then most people, I feel like, will respect your decision-making process. Now, there's also the politics of that. So while I may think a person is a fantastic state representative or state senator, but if I have different politics than them, I still may want another person in there because they more represent my interests. But from a politician standpoint, I just feel like you just have to use your own morality, your own intuition to determine what you believe to be the right thing. And then when you make mistakes, apologize and try to go on.
I think from a local level, what makes it so great, at least for me, is that there is no party identification when it comes to city politics. So the politics of left and right don't necessarily get involved. Now, it could sway your thinking process could be tainted, or the situation could vary based off of that. But as a whole, very few decisions are based on what your political affiliation is. So I do appreciate that aspect of the city council level. But as Tal said, I think there are instances where the right thing is blatant and you can't disagree with it, and you have to make that decision based on whatever information you have, but regardless, it's still the right decision. But there are times where what the right decision is for me, or what I think is right, may not correlate to the person sitting beside me. So that's when it becomes making the decision based on what the information you have in front of you. But there are instances where, as Tal said, there's the absolute truth.
Sure. And I think those are kind of like, moral and ethical sort of things that if you have principles and, kind of the guiding ways that you go about making decisions and being informed on certain things kind of are universal. And then so many things vary from, policy to policy, whether it's a decision you're making about an ordinance that might impact one type of business over the next, or something else that maybe there aren't as, definite absolutes like what you talked about. So it can get a little murky. So, hey, that's why we elect people like y'all, the talented and smart individuals that you are, to decipher.
I'm from a tiny little school, Horseshoe Bend, named after a river. I don't know about that.
Well, maybe we've already talked about this, but maybe if there's something different in this question that we haven't touched on, people get into different careers for different reasons, and, you might launch your own business to make a lot of money. And as we know from Tal, what you've said, and Scott, as a part-time position, you're not in politics to make a lot of money. That's for certain. You could become a doctor or a nurse because you like to help people. So there's different motivations for different careers and different paths. And you talked about your willingness to serve and wanting to help your community, but is there some, theme, some underlying motivation that drives you in this career, whether it's as a probate judge or just in politics in general?
Interesting question. I don't know. Outside of the service-oriented aspects of it, I mean, I guess, I guess probably it is maybe somewhat taboo to say, but I mean, I do appreciate, the responsibility that comes along with that. I appreciate that, and the fact that your community is placing a measure of responsibility in you to represent them in some capacity, be it as managing an office or on the city council. And so I do gain some personal satisfaction out of the fact, as you would if your employer or your employer said, you do something really great, and they appreciate you for it, and they show that appreciation. Well, the people of Tallapoosa County have given me the opportunity to do that for them. And then if I choose to seek re-election, I will seek affirmation out of that I've done a good job. And so I do get personal gratification when I'm able to help somebody on a very specific issue. But I would also get gratification out of the fact that people have entrusted me with something. There's a measure of respect and trust that I don't even know that I deserve. I know plenty of people who are just fantastic human beings that supported me and that I have the utmost respect for, and they've placed that responsibility in me. And so I do gain personal satisfaction out of that. I don't, like I said, I don't know that a lot of people or a lot of politicians would say that sometimes, but that I do. I appreciate that because I think so highly of a lot of people in our area, particularly people I grew up with, people I've gone to church with, people I interact with, and those people placing that amount of trust in me, people that I already think so highly of, is a huge, huge honor for me. I mean, it's such an honor, and I to me that's satisfying. It's also nerve-wracking sometimes. You don't want to let those people down, but it's satisfying, and I appreciate it.
That's a good, honest answer, which I think is, holds a lot of truth. And I can't speak for Scott, but I would assume being in a role like that for most elected officials is a motivating factor. The responsibility, the being entrusted with big decisions, and if you do a good job at it, that's rewarding. And who doesn't like that sort of positive reinforcement to be reelected and said, which reinforces the fact that you've done a good job. So that's I don't know. I don't think it's taboo at all. I think it's a good, truthful, honest answer. Scott?
Yeah, I'm Tal and I, as he's alluded to, we've had some very in-depth conversations from time to time, but didn't think that we would agree as much. But that was kind of where I was leaning toward for my answer is really, especially again on a local level. These are people that you go to church with, you grew up with, you go to school with, people that you're family friends with, and for them to entrust you with the responsibility of taking care of being the safekeepers of the city, that's a monumental thing, especially for somebody who got in it at the age that I did. Like, there was a lot to learn at that time, but to have that confidence instilled in me by those who chose to put me in the office, I think is phenomenal. And there's nothing that makes me prouder other than, saying I'm KK's husband or Charlie and Stephanie's son, to say that I'm a city councilman in Alex City, because when you move around the state and from Tallapoosa County in general, but I'll stick to Alex City, when you're going around to different places, when you say you're from Alexander City, there's somebody who has some connection somewhere to you. And so while we maybe have lost a little luster with the loss of a Fortune 500 company, we still have we're still recognized as a community.
A little name brand.
Yeah, it's still there. And I wanted to, I still think Alex City is a great place, but growing up, I thought Alexander City was it. There was no need to go anywhere else. You're moving on, you go to school, you come back here. That was what it was. And so while that is starting to happen again, I think that it's just important that people who have a platform use it appropriately. And Tal made a great point. You don't necessarily have to be in politics to be a public servant. You don't have to do that. So if you see a way for you to be involved in your community, do so. And if politics is the way to do it, then that's a great avenue to do so. But just involvement and engagement in the political process itself, I think is something that would be highly beneficial for the community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. We need good people in politics, period. I agree with you. You know, maybe you guys are looking toward your future in politics, and Scott, you're freshly elected into a new 4-year term. Tal, you got another couple of years until you're up for re-election, but do you have any ambitions beyond what you're doing now? Talk about your career goals in politics, if you have any.
Sure. I don't have any long-term career goals in politics beyond doing a really good job at what I'm doing. Now, anybody who's got into political office would absolutely be lying if they didn't say, if you're a city councilman in Davidson, smallest municipality, if you lied, you would be lying if you said, I didn't lie in bed, I was in office 4 years, hypothetical person, and at least once didn't think about running for something else, right? I mean, that's just not true. So I've had conversations with people in Montgomery. It's possible that I could seek higher political office, but at this moment, I've determined that I would probably either stay in the role I'm in now or go back to the private sector. I don't think higher political office is probably in my future right now. I have considered it. Like I said, I've had conversations about it, and I've got many friends that have chosen that path, right? But I just feel like this is where I'm best served now. As I've gotten older, there are things that matter to me quite a bit more than mattered to me 10 or 15 years ago. When I was 25 or 26, I said, heck yes, I'm running for governor one day. It's going to happen, right? At 36, I feel much more comfortable helping people that I know their face and names and know who they are, serving people I know their face and names and know who they are, and then being able to still go eat some catfish at Mama's or go to Collage or go somewhere, still see those same people and just enjoy myself, see my mother, not have to deal with there's just taking on something at a higher level. I'm just comfortable with that role right now. Do I think about it? Sure. Will I ever do it? Maybe. But things in my perspective would have to change a little bit. I would have to see an opportunity where I could offer something unique that I didn't think other people were offering, or it's just that there would have to be an opportunity that presented itself that way, where I felt like it was just opening it up itself, and that I had an opportunity where I could make a specific change or influence that I thought was great. That hasn't presented itself. So just for ambition's sake, I don't have any interest.
I like that. I like that line of thinking, knowing that sometimes it's about timing. It has to be the right time with, the right circumstances being presented where someone's leaving office and maybe there's an opening for you. But, people, sometimes it seems like they run for something just to run. So it's refreshing to hear an answer that is more to do with, working your way, kind of graduating your way into a different role based on how you think you can be beneficial, not just seeking something that's higher just because it's the next highest office. It's always should be about being able to make a better impact and doing a better job if you're trying to unseat someone than the person who's there. So I like to hear that.
Well, thank you.
For the short term, I would say I think politically, my goal is to just be the best District 3 city councilman I can be. I think that's my only priority right now, is just doing whatever I can to continue to shift the trajectory of our community. Top priority. Now, what happens after that? If I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, then maybe some things could open up opportunity-wise there. But I think that the more I've thought about it, and this may be kind of selfish to say this, but I love Alex City. So it's easier for me to display that type of passion and to be as involved and engaged with this community than to say if I were to run for, let's say, a representative seat. I don't have the same relationship that maybe in chambers. And you see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it'd be a little more difficult. I think I would be doing it just to do it at that point, and not because I truly cared about the change that could be or the benefits of the communities that I would represent.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had the opportunity to be involved on the behind the scenes aspect of the political process, and if there was ever an opportunity for me to have a more substantial role, whether the private sector or with a politician themselves, I would like the opportunity to possibly dive into that. But right now, I just want to be the best councilman I can be.
Advice to young people, maybe who are looking to do something in politics. You've mentioned that you don't have to be in politics to serve your community. There's a lot of different ways. But for those who are, you guys have both worked on campaigns. Tal, you did it professionally for a number of years. Scott, you mentioned that you worked with Walt Maddox on his campaign for governor 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So is that something that, you recommend doing if you want to pursue, or you can just jump right in?
I think it's a very admirable thing to be in elected office. One, it shows that you were strong enough in your points to persuade somebody to vote for you. I think that voting is one of the biggest validators of success or non-success. I think that there is. But if somebody that was younger, they were looking for an opportunity to get in, I would say first find some candidates or elected officials currently that you maybe align with ideology-wise, and try to pick their brain, figure out why they got into it. Kind of the same thing we're doing here, having that conversation. But I think the best way to really get a feel for it is to work on a campaign. There is no better way, I think, to see what it takes truly, especially on a statewide level, what it takes to win office. So regardless if you support somebody or not, if somebody wins in a statewide office, they have deserved it. They have done what it takes to win. And I think that a younger version of me, I would have told myself to get involved even earlier. I wasn't big on campus with SGA stuff or anything like that, but I always had an affinity for it. And I thought that if I wanted to get in it, I'd find a way to do so. But kids today will probably be the largest force politically on both sides that we've seen in a very long time. And it always is cyclical like that. But I think that this next generation of immediacy is what they're accustomed to anyway. So their influence on change, they will want it to happen quickly. So you will see them maybe bypass some of the steps that people maybe have taken before to get to where they want to be, because social media has become such a large platform to be able to get yourself out there that you could start building a platform and a following strictly off of social media.
You don't have to take those traditional steps of getting experience and getting your name into the network or the machine and then ascending that way. That's a good point. And I think we can talk about that later, but social media has obviously changed it, not only from the way that you're communicating with people, everybody's got a voice, everybody has a platform, but also the interaction between, a representative, a candidate, someone in office, and the people. Tal, you've worked extensively in campaigns and good things, bad things. Is that something you recommend? It's
a unique line of work. I will say this. I enjoyed going to work very much every day when I was doing that kind of thing, or most every day. I don't think it's necessary if you want to become a politician to get into that line of work. There are a lot of things that overlap, but they're really two different things. I mean, one is a job for a job's sake. You work for a candidate, but you're really working for yourself, right? I mean, it's a job. If you want to get into politics, then I would say get involved at a local level. And I don't necessarily mean get involved supporting candidates. I mean, join Kiwanis, join the Rotary, join a community group, pick up trash, do something, join a volunteer fire department, join a volunteer ambulance service. Just get involved and meet people. Be a servant outside of that. And if that's something that you're interested in, those roads will open up to you. From a professional political standpoint, it's a tough business, but there are really a very few people who do it. It's really marketing, advertising, things like that. Mostly grassroots is what I did a lot of. if you're interested in getting involved in that, someone out there is interested in getting involved in that, give me a call. I'll probably find you a job. You might have to pack your stuff and drive to North Carolina. But if you're interested in getting involved, that's what I did. I packed my stuff, went all over 4 states, wherever I could find work, until I made it. And I had all these contacts, and I had, people that I had done a good job for that led to job after job after job. And that led to more and more jobs with some multiple candidates. But it all started with just packing my car and saying, I'm betting on myself. Betting on myself. And if it doesn't work out, my mom and daddy still love me, and I'll come work at the post office. My dad worked at the post office until he died. And, nobody, I don't appreciate him any less because he didn't do any major things with his life, but he did do a lot of things for his community. And so, but I want to take that chance. Somebody's interested, let me know. I tell anybody who's interested in politics, you're not gonna start out being wealthy. If you've already married and got 3 kids, you might be getting into it a little bit late because you're gonna start out making not a lot and not having any benefits. But if you do a good job for people, then those doors open because there's so few people who are invested in that long term, right? There are people who volunteer. There are people who choose to do it. But most of them get out of it. They end up going to law school, or they end up doing whatever, or they start a business, and they just, that's just something they did in college, or they did a few years. That's most people. So if you are interested in getting involved and you're willing to invest the time and go where the action is, right? Go where there are competitive races, where people are investing in those races. Let me know. I'll be glad.
What did you do for the candidates that you worked for? What were your specific functions?
So it just depends on which job I had and how far back you want to go. But
you don't have to go through all of them. But
sure. The most recent thing I did is I had a contract with the Republican Attorneys General Association. I did grassroots things on behalf of Republican Attorney General candidates. I had a contract with a super PAC that supported a gubernatorial candidate. I take it back. I forgot. I did work for the AG. So I was a political director for the Attorney General, Steve Marshall. That was the most recent. But prior to that, I'd worked with the Republican Attorneys General Association before. So that opened that door for me. So I had a contract with a gubernatorial candidate, a couple more contracts just doing political work for them. I had to design mail, try to motivate voters, try to educate voters. Mostly IE or nonprofit stuff, some faith-based stuff. So it wasn't just political work. I mean, those doors open in other areas too because of just people you meet, as is in anything business you get into. When you work with somebody and you do a good job for them, or they do a good job for you, there's a relationship there, and it just opens doors. It continues to open doors. It always amazed me how many it opened, whether I was successful or not, working in those type of environments. I like to tell people, people talk about, it's just a zero-sum game. And so there's somebody that has to lose. But if you do a good job for people and people see it, those doors will open other places. And I felt like they opened for me. I recommend it to anybody who's interested in that type of thing. But just don't conflate the two. It's really, though it's the same broad structure, it's really 2 different businesses, being a political candidate and being someone who works on campaigns.
I guess kind of the last little topic here, and I think it's a pretty important one, a pretty relevant one. People, what we're talking about now is, young people especially, looking at, maybe getting into this line of work, being a politician, serving the public. And with our current, state of affairs, with everything being so, back and forth, bitterly contested, divisive, the cable news anchors and guests shouting at one another, and the nastiness that you see online and how everything is handled. Why would someone want to get involved right now, especially a young person with, maybe a lot of other options? They might look at it and say, why that? So why that? Why would someone choose it? Or why should they?
The common theme I think you've seen between Tal and I, and why we chose to do what we're doing, is because we had a passion for our communities and being able to serve. So I think that for somebody that maybe sees some things and says, why would I want to do that? You getting in is a way to maybe shift the things you don't like. So I think that's if you see an issue, and I've been saying this a lot lately, I've been going through some old sayings that my grandfather always had, and one of my favorites is, if you want something done, ask somebody. If you want it done right, do it yourself. So if you see that there's an issue, you initiate the change that you want to see. Now, I know that on a core level or on the surface, there's more to it than that, but I think just identifying an area where you can impact somebody or impact the betterment of a situation, I think you have to do it. And if you don't, then who is? You're gonna continue to see people that don't align with what you think or how you feel things should be done. So if you don't do it, then there's really no excuse at that point. If you have an attitude that you will want to get involved or be engaged, but I think that taking on the opportunity or the task in trying to create change is a novel one, and I would encourage anybody who has an affinity to do so to please do.
What do you say, Tal?
Well, I think I kind of answered part of that earlier. I do feel like it's important for good people to do something. It's important for good people to be involved. I think that we are in a very polarizing time, but I don't see it as being any more particularly nasty than it has been at other polarizing times, right? It just depends on the time we're in. Most newspapers were partisan one time. They screamed at each other all the time. They talked about other candidates badly. I will say that the dynamic that has changed does worry me a little bit is social media is a dynamic that we didn't have as much of. Here's the difference. Social media is portrayed as the 2020 public square. The difference is, in a public square, you got to look me in the eyes when you say something about me or my family or about someone else that's trying to serve their community.
There's like social norms that are just
correct
enforced.
For example, if you call somebody as a telemarketer, they might be ugly to you. If someone knocks on your door, they may be selling the same vacuum cleaner. They're much, much less likely to be ugly to you. They may tell you they don't want it. They're much less likely to cut you out. Social media has created a dynamic where you can say things about people without having to look them in the eyes. And that social norm is taken away. And I do believe that is a completely new dynamic. That is not something we've seen in the past, and that we are still grappling with how to do that. And that can be hurtful to people. And so I don't know what to tell people other than this has never been an easy game to get into. It's been a hard game for a long time. That's a different dynamic. You have to accept some of that as part of it. If you say go do something, I could go do something else. You can. But the system of government we have created has allowed you the opportunity to go do something else. And it's incumbent upon somebody, hopefully good people, to make sure that system is still in place. And it may not be so easy for you to go do something else if everything in your community is gone to pot. And so those sacrifices have to be made by good people, or they'll be made by somebody who's not good. And so I would just suggest that you get involved in your community, because our communities have allowed us the opportunity to prosper in other avenues, be it family life, church life, social life, or have a private business.
Yeah, it's great to hear you guys talk about that, and there being sort of that underlying theme, I think, through what both of you are saying, regardless of a particular viewpoint on an issue, which we hadn't really talked a lot about issues other than the thing that we might edit out, which didn't seem like it was going very good anyway.
That's my fault,
no, it's not. But I think that was important, because we could sit here and disagree or agree on a variety of different things for hours, but seeing how you both view your roles and how important you think they are in serving people and doing a good job for the right reasons, and the responsibility that you both feel, that to answer that question, and you both answered it well, is why people should do it. Because you've said it so many times tonight, Tal, if good people don't do it, people are going to do it regardless. So let's have good people step up. As the last little general piece of commentary that you guys can offer your take on, we've mentioned the divides and what we see, and I have a theory on why it seems worse now than it always has is, there probably were, large gaps in the two sides forever. But now it's so exaggerated because of social media. It's constantly in our face, on our phones, on the TV, 24/7 news cycles now that we're, so much more information. So whether it's good or bad, and rarely the good gets reported, you're fed so much more now. So it may have always been bad, but now it just seems worse because of the volume of information that we have to consume. Do you see it changing, or is it as bad as it seems?
I think it's got to do with polarization. I think I answered a lot of that question with social media, and that's just a new dynamic we're going to have to figure out as a society. But the other things is just because of how polarized we are. I don't think it is any more particularly worse. The polarization is bad now, and it gets bad, it doesn't. It gets bad, it doesn't. Unifying events help that, good and bad. Mostly bad. World War II, World War I. I mean, unifying events a lot of times, 9/11 will bring us together because we realize what's really important in those things and don't worry about the price of tea in China. But I just really feel like we're polarized a lot now, and social media does exacerbate that. That's just a new dynamic. But the 24-hour news cycle, things like that, I don't think that they're any much particular worse than they have been. A small part of me thinks that people don't read as much, even if they're reading things that are maybe not as beneficial to them. Maybe it's a partisan book or a partisan something. I feel like that the time dedicated it takes to read versus just consume something while you're driving may have some effect. But generally speaking, we have party labels for a reason. Like I said, they're good, they're bad. The reason they're inevitable, whether they actually have a label or not, is because most people take their kids to school, go to work hard, worry about what they're going to eat for supper, worry about what their kids are going to do, go home, maybe read them a bedtime story, watch some late night TV, and go to bed and do the same thing over and over again. And party labels are easy identifiers for those non-discerning people. And that's why they're inevitable. And so I feel like that, while we have to deal with new dynamics and new challenges, for the most part, I don't feel like things are so much worse. I do feel like the underlying message of getting involved hasn't changed and hasn't changed in American history. There's always been slings and arrows in different forms. Either you want to be involved or you don't.
I don't think that it's any more or less divisive or polarizing than it has been. But to piggyback off the social media comment, I think that's really because the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle has been going on pretty much since the Bush administration. We'll just it's been there forever, but really where that was the norm, where you could turn on CNN or turn on Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, whatever it may be, and you would find out what was going on a consistent basis. So whenever you wanted to find it, you could. But the Twitter, Facebook dynamic has made it instantaneous. There's no way to tell the story now without it being somewhat partisan now. It's pretty much that's what it's going to be. And so because that's what the consumer is expecting. So I think until we as consumers of news demand better from the people that are providing it, then this is what you're going to see. So social media was just another avenue to do that. But from a media standpoint, it's financial gain to be able to make it a partisan issue. So really, as with all things, follow the money. And I think that's where your answer lies.
Yeah, it seems like because of the news production, the cycle, whatever you want to call it, the volume, the social media playing into that whole thing, we have more information, but we're not more informed. Does that make sense? Like, we have so much more information than we've ever had, but it's not doing as good a job as it previously did of just telling us what we really needed to know in what the news actually is. So there's way more filters. There's way more, ways for it to be misconstrued or told differently, and that's on both sides, and I think that's pretty dangerous. But me personally, I just want people to find what's accurate, and there are ways to do that. And that's not a commentary on any issue or on any party. I think it's just, people should take a little bit more responsibility to figure out whether or not something is true.
It's just crazy to me that you could pick up that magazine right there and 4 different news stations could report it 4 different ways and have 4 different audiences thinking 4 different things happen. And that goes back to what you're saying, just there's more information, but I don't know if we're as informed. And I know different outlets have different ways that they need to communicate because they have advertisers and they're expecting certain things out of them. But as a whole, if the sky's blue, the sky's blue, man.
That's right.
That's just what it is. Or red.
Or red.
Or
that's
red.
right,
Or
yeah.
red.
You
Or
used
red.
blue for a reason.
Or
I see
red.
what you did there.
Or red.
Guys, I thought it was great. I thought it was a good conversation. Really gave us a lot of insight into your backgrounds, your motivations, your reasons, why you do what you do. I think is important for people to hear. Maybe you guys aren't always given the chance to dive deep into some of these things, and maybe on individual levels with conversations that you have. But hopefully, through the way that we spread this this video out, we can reach people, and maybe it inspires someone to get involved or to reach out and say, hey, can you put me in touch with someone in another state, or view the way that you do your jobs differently maybe than they would have, and in a more positive way, because I think you both come off as good at what you do and doing things for the right reasons. And for that, I thank you, because I think, as we've said, we just need good people, and you guys are both good ones. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tal. It's been a blast.
Always, Scott.